Great. Yeah, so how should we think about judgment, exclusivity, who gets in and who gets out? One of the things that's important to me is I think that the gospel is not necessarily exclusive in the way that we sometimes think it is or talk about it. The gospel is exclusive about who the judge is, right? That it's Jesus. But I think it's not exclusive about the particularities and details of the outcome of this judgment in terms of like who's in and who's out. I feel like when we approach judgment today, generally, our driving question is, as you mentioned, it's who's in and who's out. But when the gospel presents judgment, I think the emphasis actually gets swung, and instead it's on who the judge is one aspect, and that it's Jesus, that he's a good judge, that he actually wants what's best for our world. He knows us better than we know ourselves. His purpose is to set things right. So who the judge is, and also on why he judges. That one of the ideas that I explore in the book is that Jesus' purpose, God's purpose in judgment, is to reconcile heaven and earth from the destructive power of sin, kind of God and humanity and creation, that dimension. Another is to reconcile East and West, kind of the nations and humanity, that God's purpose is not to kind of pluck some folks out of the human social body up into some abstract acultural kingdom. God's purpose is actually to heal the human social body, to reconcile the nations and make whole humanity that sin has sort of fractured and torn apart. So God's reconciling the nations, East and West, kind of the community piece. God is reconciling good folks and bad folks. You know, it's not good folks get in, bad folks are out. Like the blood of the Lamb actually covers and creates this community where the gnarly bad folks are at the center of the party, and the upstanding citizens and self-righteous older brothers are weeping outside. You know, so Jesus' judgment, it reconciles good folks and bad folks, his purpose in it, and he reconciles weak and strong, kind of the power dimension. Those who see this constant theme that Jesus identifies with the vulnerable, the outcast, the weak, and man, there's this last becoming first and first becoming last, that God is reconciling weak and strong in the gospel. So I think the picture of judgment that starts to arise, I would suggest, is that God is setting his world right, reconciling heaven and earth, east and west, kind of the moral dimension of good folks and bad folks, the power dimension, weak and strong. And as God sets his world right, he judges or casts out, banishes all that stands unrepentantly opposed to his good purposes for our world. The things that are kind of tearing our world apart today, those things get excluded, not for kind of a caricature of torture, you know, but to protect his good and righteous kingdom by containing the destructive power of unrepentant evil. So then the question of like who's in and who's out, where that one becomes throughout the Gospels and the biblical story becomes one of surprise, that actually appearances can be deceiving, kind of our superficial look at things. God actually sees deeper. He knows the heart. He knows what's going on behind the scenes. And one of the chief characteristics of God's judgment, and when it comes to our question of who's in and who's out, is that you don't actually know, because it's going to actually shake things up, and it's going to be a massive surprise. And what that should press us into, I think, in the caricature of judgment, can make us arrogant, you know, kind of like, well, we're the in crowd, and we're going to be in the, you know, kind of gated club community upstairs, and you guys are all out, so too bad for you, you know, sorry. It can, you know, the caricature can kind of promote this sort of arrogance, like an insider elitist arrogance. But I think the gospel picture promotes a humility, actually, of going, dude, what I'm faced with is getting myself right before God, kind of prepared for his kingdom, allowing Christ to begin shaping and forming me as an agent of this good work of reconciliation that he's about in his world. And I get to kind of trust, the freedom to trust the bigger picture of how that all works out into the hands of one who I believe is a good and righteous judge, where our trust becomes not in our knowledge of all that, it becomes a confidence in the character of Christ as the King.